Hey, Jeff Fuller back with you. Great to be with you today. Jay Fuller Interviews is where you can find all things interviews. And we're just trying to tell stories to make your story more inspired and transformed because of the stories that we hear. And great one for you. Jeff Davis coming on. You can subscribe to this YouTube channel and find all these interviews. A lot of Vermont basketball being talked about, but during this COVID, there's not much better to talk about than to reminisce. But Jeff, welcome to the program.
Thanks, Jeff. Thanks for having me.
And so for you, this is so weird, probably for you, because I've been following your career ever since I was in high school because we're the same age and we
Mhm.
played Division 4 basketball. My team was not as good as your team, but could you just reminisce for a moment and talk about what it was like playing in Craftsbury, Vermont, which I think they're known for cross country skiing. What is Craftsbury known for?
Well, it's crazy because when you have a small school, you really can encounter these bubbles of athletes, or probably any other type of activity. But when I was at Craftsbury, we had really good athletics, and the couple of classes above me both had a lot of good athletes, and so I mean, we being in a small school, you had to play all three sports that were offered, because if you didn't play all three sports, they didn't happen. So we had a really solid soccer team. They won a state championship when I was a sophomore. Our basketball team went to the championship for 4 years in a row. We never got over the hump in baseball. We seemed to always drop in the semifinals, but all three sports were actually, pretty good for programs. And so when I was there, that was really just the athletic piece was really going good.
And it's a lot of fun, especially in a small town, because the community really comes out to support and pack the gym because there's nothing else to do in the winter. The school
Yeah,
I
they're long winters for sure. And of course, where we played in the gym, now to think about people having to come into that gym as opposing teams and play in that small bandbox. Yeah, but it was special. I mean, there was a buzz in the town all the time about our groups. And yeah, it was one of those things where the town would shut down and go to all the games, home and away, really. They
Yep.
traveled well. And yeah, it was pretty neat.
And the school I attended, we only had two sports. We were so small. But I remember when I was really young, so this wasn't even high school because you guys were too good and you'd beat up on us. But when I was really young, just going into the gymnasium, and I think it was Duncan Simmons,
Yep.
couple years older, I think my brother's age, but he was dunking off the wall in that gym in warm-ups.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
and then I spoke with somebody and they said that there was no baseline in that gym, and then you had the guide wires over the top of the court. For you, was that just normal? When did you realize, man, this gym is not what it should be?
I think I realized the gym wasn't what it was supposed to be. Jeff, I can still remember the first 2 points I ever scored in a game. And it was at Hardwick Elementary. I was in second grade. This is a true story. And I drove baseline. I can remember this vividly. I drove baseline, just going to go up and lay up a layup, because at our gym, that's where your basket was. If you drove baseline, you could just go up and score. And then I took my step and a half and I was about to score, and I was literally behind the backboard. And I remember kind of floating it up almost over the backboard and having to go in. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is so different than my court. So yeah, we always knew it was unique. I mean, my dad played there, and in fact,
Hmm.
my dad would say that when he was growing up, that gym was one of the premier gyms around. I mean, at that point, people were playing in town halls and things like that, and Craftsbury Academy's gym was beautiful. But clearly, by the time I got there, it was a little outdated, and it was very unique for sure. No 3 point line on the baselines. The length from the jump circle to the 3 point line on either side was one step. It was pretty crazy now that I think about it.
Oh, it's a lot of fun because you could say that you were shooting from half court all day, and
Exactly.
then they don't know. Hey, so congratulations, 21 years as a head boys basketball coach at Mount Mansfield. I
Thank you.
understand that you're stepping down, and then some just because spending time with your family. Here's a great picture. I believe this is you and your daughter on the
Yeah, that's
bench.
Anya. Yep.
I just want to set this up. I coached AAU for Harwood. I think my daughter was in eighth grade. We had
Mhm.
7 players. Yeah. No, we must have had 8 players, and we had 2 go out of the game because they butted heads and they both needed stitches.
Oh my gosh.
We were getting killed like by 30 points, and I look at the player next to me on the bench, and it's my daughter. And I look at her like, "What am I supposed to do?" And she's looking at me like, "Don't put me in." And so this picture here, how much joy is it just to watch your kids? Because I remember in high school, everything revolved around me and sports and what I wanted to do. But now for
Right.
you,
Sure.
being successful, but now just getting enjoyment from watching your kids. Explain about that.
Yeah, well, that picture was taken just before one of our games. Both my kids would like to sit on my bench all the time, and that's the one thing about being a coach, and something I'm very thankful for is your kids grow up around the game, and that's Anya there. We're just talking about something before tip off, but she's been involved in going into half times and listening to the stuff in the huddles and just being around the game. She goes to practice all the time. And my son was the same way. When he got a little older, he'd rather sit with his friends in the stands than sit on the bench. But, it's really neat. It's one thing that I really am feeling thankful about is that my kids really grew up around the game based on what I was doing a little bit. And so it's great. I mean, all my teams have always embraced them, and they've always sort of been part of it. So it's kind of cool.
And this next picture behind me, it's actually your son and daughter
Yeah,
just
Anya and
putting up
Zach getting
shots.
some shots up. Yeah, that's one of the benefits, I think. Another one of being a coach is having the access like that to get in the gym. I can remember, dribbling down my dirt road and couldn't wait to hit pavement when I was working on ball handling. And now my 2 kids have a shooting machine now and getting shots up in the gymnasium. So definitely a little bit different experience there.
So, do you still have a hidden key to the gym that nobody's going to know about so you can sneak in and get shots up with your kids?
Well, I'm still a teacher there, so I definitely still have a key to and access to the gym. There's no question. And yeah, I mean, the thing about Mount Mansfield is one of the reasons we've had such a successful program, to be honest, is the accessibility. I mean, our athletic director, our superintendent, all of those in charge say we don't want the lights off in that gym. We want people using it. And they've created access standards that people can use the gym, and that's something that's really, really important.
And when you talk about building a program or a culture of winning, that's something that I've spoken with other head coaches. They say you at Mount Mansfield have done that extremely well, especially with the boys program. Can you talk about the security that you must have saying, I'm going to allow other coaches to coach younger kids and really bring them up? Talk about that either with your staff or with different mini metro or AAU coaches if you want to build a program, how to give trust.
Yeah, I mean, I've been very blessed. I've been very lucky to have parents that have been program first. It started way back with, Tom Polovich, Jim Driscoll, starting this AAU kind of tradition at Mount Mansfield. Jeff Springer had 3 players go through our system, and he was always program first, do what's best for the program. Parents like that with no hidden agendas that only want to get the program better. And that's all I've had. And it's been amazing. And so I realized early on that, you can't do everything alone. You just can't. We have an MMYBL, which is a youth basketball league board that has a governing decision-making process. We have, mini metro and AAU and things like that. It really starts with finding those volunteers that have a goal and a vision that is program first. And inevitably, all of these volunteers will have players in the program. I mean, that's why they're there. They're parents. But I've just been so lucky to have parents that really understand the process and really understand the goals of the program. And it wasn't just about their kid, which quite honestly, that's unique in some settings. And so, it really, I think it's important that, we do opportunities with the youth program around coaching clinics and player clinics, and our kids that are on our team work those kids out a little bit during the season, and we're visual, and that's really important. I mean, I think, our AD Dave Marlowe does a great job. There's a couple nights where, hey, if you wear your rec shirt to the game, you get in free, or you get a hot dog, or all these little things that have third, fourth, fifth graders watching what the varsity players are doing, and they say, I want to do that someday. I want to be on that court, and that's really important. And it's certainly grassroots. It's got to start really young, and there has to be a lot of attention paid to the development of second, first, third, fourth, all those young ages, and they have to have a tie to the program. That's really important.
Well, I think your longevity certainly helped with that, but how much of your were you impacted by just growing up in Craftsbury? Because going to a small school, when you were in elementary school, you were part of the program because there was nothing else to do. Did you bring that into creating this culture?
Well, the thing that I found right away that was interesting to me, like I was used to going on school buses to games when I was in second grade. I mean, we would play Hardwick, Wolcott, Cabot, Concord, whatever. And when I was in second, third grade, we were playing in games. Around where I am teaching now, they don't play, formal school basketball until middle school.
Right.
And so the one thing that I definitely was aware of early on was you can lose a lot of players to other things that are going on if you wait that long to get them into the sport. Yeah. And so the thing that I can say about my experience at Craftsbury, I knew early on that it was definitely different than what the kids in my district are going through as second, third, fourth graders. They had, afternoon or Sunday afternoon or Saturday morning basketball, and that's it. And so I knew right away that we had to do something to start that process. And it wasn't just going to be, hey, I'm going to sit back and let the schools do it, because around here, there is no elementary school basketball. So that was the big thing for me, was just recognize that difference.
Now, this picture behind me, I don't know if you recognize it.
Oh, boy.
I got to be friends with Wilbur Mac McAllister, and he has film game tape from the Odd going back probably 40 years. And so I said, can I look at that 1993 championship game?
Oh, boy.
At number 52, that is you. And as you mentioned, you made the championship game all 4 years, and you were a tall point guard. I just want to back up. Playing Division IV in Vermont, I actually made the varsity team in 8th grade, so kind of feather in a cap, although I didn't get any minutes until my junior year. But can you just talk about how you were prepared or motivated for that final game your senior year after being there previously?
Well, I can tell you right away that my senior year, I was basically on one foot. Right before playoffs started, I had a really bad sprained ankle, and that definitely took a lot of the distraction away. Just trying to manage that was fairly difficult. That year was interesting. We really didn't have the balance that we wanted, or a good team would want to have, top to bottom, and a lot of the scoring. Early on when I was playing at Craftsbury, we had Duncan Simmons, John Duffel, players like that, where I was really in tune with us facilitating and getting players the ball. By the time I was a senior, everybody had graduated from those groups, and it was myself and Pat Reel and a couple other guys, Kevin Willey, that scored a little bit. And we knew that we had to take a lot of shots and we had to score. So going into that game, I believe we lost to Rochester by a point in that game. But it wasn't any unique situation for us. I mean, myself and Pat in particular had been to 3 state championship games earlier, so it was kind of the same thing. We thought we had a shot, and we did have a shot, but unfortunately, they made one more play at the end.
Can you talk about the Barry Auditorium? Did it ever lose its luster, being able to go so many times?
Never. And I'm going to tell you, and this, I don't want this to come out the wrong way, but compared to the experience of Patrick Gym, Barry Auditorium is still more unique and special. You're talking about a situation where you have, an elderly gentleman outside of your locker room with a sport coat on and just guarding your locker room. And then you show up at halftime and they have cut oranges for you, and they folded all the clothes that were in there. I mean, it's an unbelievable thing to go to Barry Aud, and I still go a lot. I love that place. There's nothing near it. And obviously, having, you can't have 4,000 people at Berry Auditorium. So I understand why Division I has to have it at Patrick Gym. And obviously Patrick Gym is an amazing experience as well. But the odd is just, it's the odd. There's nothing, it didn't get old. I mean, I can always think to myself, I've played 8 games there, which is awesome. And it would never get old, ever.
It's an amazing place. I had the opportunity to go there as an assistant coach this year. Harwood won the semifinal game. We were anticipating the championship game just as everything happened, but just the experience of being on the sideline. And I'm an assistant to the assistant. I'm just above the
That's a perfect spot to be, though.
It had a great view, and it was so much fun. Following your time at Craftsbury, you went to Norwich, and I just wanted to share briefly that I played summer league with Harwood. That's a town I grew up in, even though I went to a small school. And I played against Paul Pecor when he was at Mount Mansfield. And I remember Jason Flanders saying, "Hey, do you want to guard this kid? He's really good." I was like, "Yeah, I'll guard him." And again, being cocky, self-centered, I got torched, and I'm like, "Hey, somebody better switch because this is bad even for summer league." When you first met Paul at Norwich, you guys became great friends, are great friends, each other's weddings, all of that. First question, did you come in at the same time in that friendship built because you were both new? And second is, playing at Norwich, how much of a adjustment was that for you coming from Craftsbury?
Well, I knew Paul before we came into Norwich because we both played on the Alhambra team together that summer against New Hampshire. And the coach that was recruiting us was Troy Amaris, was the Norwich coach at the time. He ended up leaving before we even stepped on the campus. But he was the one that recruited us, and so he was very smart, and he actually got us together early. I played a lot of summer basketball with Paul that summer, and we actually made our decision somewhat together. On the phone, we're like, what are we going to do? You want to do this? Or because I had some other schools that I was interested in going to, as did he. So I knew Paul going into the school year, and so I will tell you that there was definitely an adjustment for me, probably more so than Paul. Just coming from Craftsbury, just the speed of the game, the physicality. It was definitely different. Paul playing in the Metro for 3 years. I think he was a little bit more prepared in that sense. And I think it definitely took me a little bit longer to adjust. Right out of the gate, I mean, there's a situation at Norwich where what was going to be our point guard that year ended up not playing. And so Paul, right out of the gate, was thrust into it as a freshman. I think he ended up with 2,400 points there. So I say he started out pretty good.
Because you played point guard, what position did you have to switch to, or did you still play that position?
Yeah, no, I had to change my game a little bit. I would say on the offensive end of things, I was a 3. I was a shooter, played 3. Unfortunately, I was never very quick. I'm sure you can't believe that, but I was never able to sit down and guard a 2 or 3 at the college level. So I had to really work hard in the weight room and get stronger, and so that I could guard a 4 on the defensive end. So I was probably what they would call a stretch 4.
So I have a friend now we play pickup with. He played at a pretty high level, but he's 6'4", and all he does is shoot threes. And I'm like, this is Vermont. You need to get in the post and post up a little bit, because I'm short and I want to be the shooter. It's just interesting how the game has changed to be all about threes. In that question, I have another friend who's 6'8", and he remembers hearing crowd noise of saying, well, he's just tall, it's not even fair. For you being 6'4", 6'5", in high school especially, did you ever get that crowd noise, or people just thinking like it wasn't fair because you were taller, bigger than everybody?
I don't think so, because I played on the perimeter. I was a guard, and so I think it was never one of those situations where I was just turning around and putting the star on top of the Christmas tree. I was never that tall at 6'5". I never really had to hear that. But the thing I would say is and I say this to my kids as well. It's really important to not have a position as you develop.
Yeah.
and to say everybody, we say this to all of our, everybody's a point guard. Everybody's a point guard.
Yeah.
You know, so I think probably your buddy that's playing men's league wants to shoot threes because he doesn't want to get hurt because he probably has golf or something to play afterwards. But for me, I was just more comfortable on the perimeter, and I really was never a great post player. I would score a little bit in the post if I had a decided matchup. You know, coaches would put a smaller kid on me because I am more comfortable on the perimeter, and then I could go down low and score a little bit. But I never really heard that.
So behind me is a picture. This is, I don't
Oh
know
my goodness.
which 163-pound buck, I believe.
Yeah.
And there's something about Vermont that you're always a Vermonter. And I say that to change the tone a little bit because I was actually brought into a conversation about the social injustice that our culture is going through right now. And I said, I can represent a Vermont redneck, but if you want an Asian voice, that's not me. And I was fortunate that whenever I played with, more than against, but with a black guy or a good friend, African American friend, it was more celebrated because there weren't many black people in Vermont. So it's like, you play basketball, you must be good. So it's kind of the opposite of racism. You put too much pressure on them. When you see what our country is going through now, how, as a coach, as a teacher, can you help students engage in meaningful conversations?
That's a great question. In fact, I just finished the course entitled or called "Courageous Conversations About Race," and one of the things that I came away from after finishing that course, you know, is I would always consider myself colorblind, and I would always say to myself, I treat everybody the same, and I'm going to treat an African American like everybody else. But then what I realize is when I'm saying I'm treating him like everybody else, I'm treating him white. And it was a very interesting and provocative read and course that I took. You know, clearly, you know, the demographic we have at Mount Mansfield is the majority, 99%, 96. I don't know the percentage, but it is a mostly white school. I have coached African American players, you know, and I think that when you look at a state like Vermont, there's just not a lot of opportunity for our society in Vermont to adjust, or not necessarily adjust, but just exist together because of the predominance of the white culture. And so it's really, to me, you know, it's important that we're able to take a step back and understand that there are differences when it comes to race, and race and nationality are different. And there are differences around the color of your skin, and it's okay to say that. And so what I learned from that course is definitely that, you know, I think we all as a community have a lot of work to do when it comes to making sure that everybody is given the same opportunities.
And I understand that you just helped your dad finish up a deck, something like that.
Yeah.
How nice is it to be around and have that opportunity to help your dad and just do these things with your hands that sometimes people don't think you get to do?
Well, it was nice for about a day and a half, and then it got a little bit less nice. But no, obviously, we lost our mom a couple of years ago, and so my dad is still living on his own, and he has a pretty large deck that needed staining, and so I was able to do that. Now, what that means, what you don't know, is that means now my wife is expecting me to stain our deck, which is it's actually probably going to start today. But no, I mean, my dad, you know, he was my first coach when I was in second grade. He would follow me around during my Norwich years. He comes to almost all of my Mount Mansfield games. I mean, it's been great, you know, and he's really, all he wants to do is talk about basketball, almost to a point where there's a lot of times I don't want to talk about basketball, you know, but he just loves it. And as he's getting on in years a little bit, it's been more difficult because he's not comfortable driving, especially in the evening. So we try to get him to games as much as possible, but just being able to go up there, I love Craftsbury. I mean, I can't wait to go up there again.
It's special to have your parents around and to be able to help them. And I just know for my son, who's a senior in high school or graduating next week from Harwood, it's so different. And I remember being upset with my mom, crying when I left for my senior year of college, and saying, "Oh, my baby boy's going." But now you're just drawn, and it's just a change of perspective
For
for them.
sure.
This picture, Mount Mans or the Burlington Free Press said a fiery coach is retiring from Mount Mansfield. I just look at the pain on your face as a coach. Can you just talk about your years at Mount Mansfield and how much you love your kids, but still they're high school kids playing a sport where mistakes happen all the time?
Yeah, I mean, when I started at Mount Mansfield, I knew we had really good young players. The first group, that was the year that they won in 2004. I started in '99, and I knew that there was good players in the program, and then the young players I knew coming through were really good. Um, so the thing about basketball is it is a game of mistakes. There's no question, and I tell my players all the time, there's a fine line between being afraid of making mistakes and being okay with making mistakes. And they know that my least favorite phrase in the world is "my bad," and so they kind of get that. My expectation is, yeah, you're going to make mistakes. We know you made the mistake. Now just get back on defense.
Yeah.
And so it's that fine line where they have to have a lot of trust in you. They have to know that you overall care for them and you want to make them better. Holding them accountable is really important. It's more important to create a culture where they hold each other accountable, so that you're not always in their ear. But the thing about Mount Mansfield is I feel very fortunate about is I've always had the trust of the administration, the parents, and the players to understand that for the greater good, there is going to be some tough times, and your kid is going to get challenged a little bit. But it's always to try to make them better, and you have to have that trust. And I think MMU has definitely allowed me to do that.
And I just have a question, and this is just you and me. It's not going to be broadcast anywhere. With referees in Vermont, some are great and you can kind of banter and have a good time with. Others, it seems, and maybe it's different at Division One, but others seem to control with an iron fist that you can't have that gamesmanship, I guess. Can
Mm-hmm.
you just talk about how you wanted to interact with referees and what leeway you had with certain ones?
Yeah, I mean, I think a referee is very similar to an umpire. I mean, you got to know their strike zone. You got to know who is doing the game and what they are comfortable in terms of gamesmanship and communicating. There are some referees that really enjoy and appreciate banter and talking to coaches and explaining what they saw. They're very comfortable in their skin, and they will talk to you about what they saw and what they made as a call, or what they're going to call that evening, or whatever. And to be honest with you, to me, those are the ones that are just more experienced, and they've been there longer in terms of those environments. A lot of the times, the officials that don't want to talk to you are the ones that are a little uncomfortable right now in the game they're in, to be honest with you. And so, generally speaking, the officials that have worked our games are all very open to discussion and talk. And you know what? They definitely will say enough is enough, and then you're like, oh, okay, enough's enough. And so you got to how to kind of figure that out. Everyone's a little different. Every official's a little different. But it's part of the game, and it's an enjoyable part when an official can have a moment and kind of a chuckle about what just happened. It's really half the time people see a conversation. It's generally all in a lot of it's in good fun. And so officials definitely have a hard job to do. The whole adage, 50% of the people think you're wrong, kind of thing. And so it's not something that they take lightly. They work hard at it. But they're all different. They're human, and everybody has a different personality. Much in the same way as a coach would have a different. There's some coaches that don't even stand up, and then there's other coaches that are very fiery. I mean, everybody's a little different.
Definitely. Jeff, we'll get in the weeds a little bit, then I'll get you out in a few minutes. But a couple questions, specifically basketball. In 21 years,
Mm-hmm.
how have you had to change your system for the players that you've had, or have you tried to run the same system? How important is it to be agile as a coach, especially here in Vermont?
Well, it's certainly important because you can't pick your players. If you're a public high school coach, you better be willing to adjust what you want to do based on your players' strengths. I mean, I would say overall, I think it would be fair to say that we've been very lucky to have very good players at Mount Mansfield, and we've had a lot of size in general, and so it's always had sort of that appeal to me to be an inside-out team, and to we run a lot of high-low stuff, and we've always had pretty good bigs that can score inside a little bit. But there's also been times where we've had to spread the floor and play that style. And so certainly, I think anybody that has success over the years has had to change their style and their systems, because I can't say I'm going to go out and get this 6'6" big man that I need.
Right.
That's just not how it works in public school.
Now, again, I always thought I was a lot better than I was. And when I was a junior, I was invited to play on an AAU basketball team. My parents said, it's a waste of money. You're not that good. Go play against Harwood, which was larger, bigger kids, or go up to Johnson State and play. When I think about AAU now, I've said it publicly, I think it's almost a necessary evil for a lot of programs around the state, maybe even a money grab for some coaches. For you, with athletes at the Division I high school level, how important is it? Does it reinforce bad habits? What are your thoughts on AAU or even mini metro for the younger grades?
Well, I think mini metro and AAU are very different. The thing about AAU has changed a lot since I played AAU. Yeah. I can remember going down to Winston-Salem, North Carolina on the Vermont team, and there was you had to make a team from Vermont, and you traveled with that team down to the national tournament. That's what AAU was for me. You can't pigeonhole all AAU programs into one process or environment. There are some AAU programs that are really high level and go to elite tournaments, and I've had a few players play on those teams. We use the AAU at Mount Mansfield at a much more local level. We would use AAU as a way to extend our season for our younger players, and so that had a lot of the reason for our success is that they played together in the spring as well as in mini metro. And then unfortunately, there's AAU where there's a disgruntled parent that just wants to make up a team and have a kid, his or her kid play more. That happens too. And so AAU is one of those, I don't know if I want to call it a necessary evil. I do think it's necessary. But also we understand as coaches that, looking at a player's stats at a Sunday afternoon AAU game in May may not be the best way to go about things. But clearly it's had its place. And it's a way for kids to continue to get to develop and get better. And then, looking at a kid like Taylor Bowen, who left our program after his freshman year, the reason he's where he's at now is because of his AAU program, that he's playing on. So clearly there's a very small handful of kids where AAU serves them to play at a much higher level than most of the players that play AAU around here.
And I do think anytime kids can get on a court, it's great to have them play and touching the ball and learning the game. I just wish there was more pickup games that seemingly, now I'm the old guy, get off my lawn, but it seems like whenever there's a game, people from our generation would bike or walk or get a ride to the park to go play with their friends, the older guys and all of that.
Yeah.
Hey, so Matt Glass, Jeff Springer is a good friend of mine. You brought up his name earlier. He said that Matt Glass scored one basket his seventh grade year.
Yeah.
How do you as a coach allow for what some would say a late bloomer, when I know of parents saying that their kid in 7th grade is the best and they're looking at colleges? How do you kind of wink and nod but know inside this kid's going to take time, or this kid may have already reached his peak?
Well, it's definitely, I've seen both scenarios happen, and you have to be very guarded with your assessment of players when they're very young. And when I mean very young, is like Matt Glass is a perfect example. I mean, when he was in 7th grade, he was all arms and legs, and he hadn't caught up to his body yet. And he was also playing with some pretty good players. Like that was when we won 2 in a row that when he was a junior a sophomore and junior. So the year ahead of him, which would have been eighth graders, they're pretty good. And so we knew he had a process that he needed to follow to develop. And then you have some players that just as eighth graders are as developed as they're going to be, and in that setting are absolutely dominant, just dominant, because they are. If you put an 11th grader in a middle school gym and have them play, they would look very dominant. And a lot of times you have kids that are in eighth grade that are completely developed physically, and that's what they're going to be. And so you have to be very careful around putting too much pressure on a kid, first of all, and saying, hey, you're the heir apparent and something like that. And you also have to have a very open mind around players that love the game that just aren't quite there yet, because a lot of times those players are the ones that really can progress, and their ceiling's a lot higher. So definitely it takes a little time to figure that out, and a lot of times it just sorts itself out, to be honest with you, Jeff. I mean, kids are going to try out, kids are going to try to make teams, and the best players will be picked. But clearly, you can't look at a kid in 7th grade or 8th grade and say, wow, this kid's the next coming, because you just don't know. There's a lot that can happen.
No, you don't. And I think that's why it's important for coaches to really reach out to all the players on an emotional level as well, but just to invest and not just handpick when kids are so young.
And that's the whole program first, man. That's what it's about. And when you mentioned Mini Metro not too long ago, Mini Metro for us, our goal when we started up, when I say our goal, it was mostly the boards again, is to try to get a level for each grade. So we had 4 Mini Metro teams instead of 2, and that was huge, absolutely huge. And so Mini Metro has been very important because we have 2 different middle schools, and so Sunday afternoons were the only time that our players played together. And so we use Mini Metro definitely as that sort of intro to the program, what they were going to be in 2 or 3 years. But yeah, so it's important that you have a focus and you have parents that are volunteers that understand program for sure.
Now I could talk basketball for days, hours with you, so I'll just try to wrap this up, and I'll take you out for lunch another time, and we can chit chat about all things basketball. But I had the opportunity to interview Karl Mecklenburg. He was a standout linebacker for the Denver Broncos yesterday. People can look at that up on the YouTube channel. But
I'm a pretty big downgrade from that.
The same question I asked him: how do you stay humble when you've achieved such success? And he said, Jeff, I remember the losses more than the wins. Here is you holding the net. You've had multiple state championships. Do you remember those, or do you remember the ones that slipped away more? What eats at you, and especially now that you retired after 21 years, is going to be what you hold on to until maybe you make a comeback someday?
Well, I think first of all, I know that I've been very blessed to have a program that's sort of picked me up, and my 21 years, I've had a lot of great coaches around me and players around me. So it's quite honestly not very difficult for me to stay humble when it comes to that. And Rice keeps you humble pretty much from time to time, as does Rutland. But the things that I remember more than anything, are just the relationships with the kids. And yeah, the wins and losses come and go, and I think about a few here and there. I do think about the Rutland championship game a lot in 2017, when neither team could score, it seemed, in the last 4 minutes. We ended up losing that game, and I felt that was a very winnable game at that time. And that definitely, will I think about that. But I don't dwell on it. I think about the good times. I think about TJ Weston's bank shot to put us into overtime against Brattleboro. I think about all these things. There's many memories I can draw on that are positive memories. But the biggest thing is just understanding that this has really very little to do with me. The program that Mount Mansfield has become, and as it was made by parent volunteers and players right alongside me, athletic directors, the administration. I mean, that it really, when you get the keys to a Cadillac, you just try not to go off the road. And that's kind of what I've been trying to do for 21 years.
Well, I think that's a testament to your dad, to growing up in Craftsbury and just understanding what a true Vermonter is. At least I'd like to think so. But Jeff, thanks so much for making the time. Wish you all the best, and we will. Once this pandemic clears a little bit more, let's get lunch.
Oh, I'd love to, Jeff. I really appreciate you having me on, man. Thank you.
And again, that's Jeff Davis, 21 years at Mount Mansfield, hometown hero for Vermonters, and what a great job he's done with the Cougars. And we're going to continue to celebrate him as we cheer on his kids and those that he's invested in. Hey, thanks so much. We'll be back with you later. We have Chris Caioli joining, and it's going to be a great interview this afternoon. Talk to you again soon.